All right, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everyone who's a fan of Lee Chamberlin's Playwrights in Project. This is Erika, Lee's daughter, and today I'm very excited. After much persistence, we have finally have the pleasure of having Victoria Zackheim with us today, who is a writer, an editor, a playwright, and also teaches writing at UCLA. That's an online course that she does every semester. She has students ages 18 to 92. And also, of course, Victoria Zackheim was Lee Chamberlin's friend. They became friends over time. So I'm really excited to have Victoria on today because of the fact that she published, or was, I should say, not published, but was influential in getting Lee's work, her writing work, in 2 anthologies. And they had a pretty long relationship and contact, some of it humorous, the way it started out. So Victoria, welcome today. Thank you so much for making the time to be here. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Anything I left out that you want to let people know about yourself and your career path?
My career path. Well, my career path seems to be that I'm always waiting. You know, it's the plague of the writer. I'm waiting to hear if the publisher likes the anthology that I just submitted. I'm waiting to hear if the agent likes the novel that I just submitted. I'm waiting to start writing with my collaborator in a screenplay that we're working on. So everything is always like, it's like going to Las Vegas and betting on the come line, or or shooting craps, whatever it is. And of course, as you know, you never get paid unless the project actually sells. So you could put in literally hundreds, if not thousands of hours on a project and end up having nothing. So who knows? I mean, I don't know. I just don't know. But that's what my life is about right now, is doing a lot of waiting for other people to decide what's going to happen. And the interesting thing is that if I were 45 years old, I would just say, fine, I'll go out and work on my next projects. And when they get back to me, they will. But as you can see, I'm no longer 45. And I hear that tick, tick, tick of the age clock going. And I want to do all of this while I still can. I don't think I've got more than another 10 or 15 years of good, strong, focused writing left in me. But who knows? Anyway, that's where I am right now.
Oh, well, I mean, if we get another 10 or 15 years, well, I don't want to reveal ages, but that'd be pretty awesome, Victoria.
Well, I've had the same agent for many years, and Jill has sold all of my anthologies, which now are, it's either 7 or 8, I'm not sure. But she passed on the novel, and I did major rewrites and is with another agent now. So we'll see. I mean, he loves it so far, but who knows?
Well, this what you're talking about right now, the anthologies, is a great segue into the 2 anthologies, Objects in the Mirror, which I believe is a reflection on youth.
Well, actually, that was called A Face in the Mirror.
Face in the Mirror.
And it was writers writing about, it was really quite existential, writing about who they were when they looked in the mirror as a child, who they thought they would become, what were the expectations of their family and their community. And now that they are seasoned, meaning most of them were over 60 and some quite a bit older than that, now they look in the mirror, what do they see? Are they satisfied? Do they feel that they failed? Do they feel that anything they didn't accomplish, they still have time to do so? It was a really interesting anthology for me. I think it was the 3rd one that I did. And the first one where there were men and women. And
so let me slow you down.
Yeah.
Okay? Because we're focusing on Lee here.
Right.
Also.
So Lee wrote an essay for that anthology because there was nobody I knew who would be better to focus on that existential question than Lee, because she always was processing, who am I? How do I fit into the universe? Where will I go? And I worked with a very difficult editor at Prometheus, who was very sparse in her praise. But when I delivered the manuscript, I didn't hear back from her for quite a long time. And finally, I contacted her and said, you must hate it. She said, oh, no, it's wonderful. I said, okay, what did you like about it? And she said, well, Lee Chamberlin's essay was the closest to perfection I've ever read, which I had also sensed, having read it. And I mean, my job was not only to bring the authors together after I conceived the idea for an anthology, but to edit their work. And Lee made it very easy. It was like a word on page 4, a little phrase on page 12. That was pretty much it, because she was hard on herself. She expected a great height of writing, and she always attained it. So she was easy to edit.
And how is it that you even decided or found her to, what was the catalyst to even put her in this book? Did she tell she had been writing, or how did this come about?
Well, I mean, our friendship, that I'll tell you later how we met, because it's really a wonderful story of serendipity. But a lot of our friendship was based on our writing. And her writing, my writing, feeding back and forth, that sort of thing. And so I knew that she was a gifted writer. There was no question about that. I'd read her plays. I'd read a few things that she had written. So when I put this anthology together, as I do with every anthology, I make a list of my dream list, my A-team. And I thought, who would be perfect for this anthology? And I wanted to get humor. I wanted to get serious. I wanted to get people who would write compelling essays that would make the readers think. And your mom's name, of course, just popped right into my head immediately.
Wow. Okay. So how did you get into even putting anthologies together?
I was in the car one day. This was around 2005, 2006, and I was listening to NPR. And somebody on the radio said the phrase, "the other woman." Now, I never read anthologies. I just was not a fan at all. But in my head, there was a little voice saying, wouldn't it be great to get like 20 people together to write about the other woman, but not about infidelity, about their mothers-in-law? I don't know. Don't even ask me how that popped in my head.
That's a good one.
I'd had a contact with Sandra Dykstra, who was a top agent in the country, and considered by many to be unapproachable. That she was cool and she was difficult. But I had a very nice exchange with her, and she'd given me a lot of support about my writing. So I contacted her, and they put me right through to her. And I said, I've got this idea for an anthology, and I explained it, and she said, love it. Put together your list of authors. Check and see who will actually be in the anthology. If you could put together an A list, then let's do it. So I started contacting people, and one of the people I contacted, two of them actually, were Michael Chabon and his wife Ayelet Waldman. And I said, I'm doing this anthology about mothers-in-law. Are you interested in? Ayelet got back to me immediately and said, you're not going to believe it, but we just submitted an essay on mothers-in-law. So I contacted Sandy Dykstra again and said, well, it's been done. She said, well, come up with another idea. That was a great one. And I thought about infidelity, but I had never experienced it. And it wasn't something, it seems kind of prurient to me. So, but I contacted her and said, what about infidelity of the other kind? But it can be open to any kind of infidelity. She said, let's do it. So she assigned me to one of her younger agents, Jill Marshall, and she taught me how to write a proposal. And I went out to the same writers, many of the same, but all women. And I ended up with a phenomenal list of women, Jane Smiley, Susan Cheever, et cetera, et cetera. And we put together the anthology, and it was really wonderful. And it was a huge hit. And I thought, boy, this is going to be easy. I made a lot of money, and I'll do this for the rest of my life. And the next anthology I sold made, I think it was 1/20 of what I got paid for the other woman. Yeah, and it never got much more than that. But the last one I did that I've just submitted, I've really enjoyed doing. It's about mystery writers writing about their own mysteries of life. But the whole anthology thing for me, because I live alone and I work alone, it's my way of every year or so creating a community around myself of writers. I get to reach out to them. I get to work with them. I get to build, if you'll excuse me, a stable of authors. So I can go to them again for the next idea. And for me, it's very exciting. It's not financially lucrative at all. In fact, some of these have ended up being really expensive for me out of pocket, but I love the process. The other one that your mother did was the anthology on faith. And there was no question. As soon as I came up with the idea, I contacted her, and she said yes.
And why was there no question? What was it about Lee that, faith equals Lee? How so for you?
Well, I've never known anybody in my lifetime who looked at faith the way your mother did. It wasn't just, I believe. It's, I believe because, and I want to know more about this. And why do you believe? And let's talk about it. Everything for her, as you know, was a learning and or teaching experience. She had to understand. Your mother had a curiosity that just was limitless, which was one of the things I loved about her. There was never a, gee, I don't know. It's, oh, I'll find out. And she did. But she also was always involved in self-exploration about her own spirituality, which when I first met her, I wasn't so interested in. As I got older, I became more and more touched by people who were doing that exploration. Not necessarily that they were spiritual, but they were curious about their spirituality. And so she was that one person I knew who, no matter what it was in terms of faith, she was going to explore it. And she would explore it and take it apart piece by piece, thread by thread, until she got right down to the very basic of it. And I just found that fascinating. And of course, I had tremendous respect for her, the way her mind worked, because she was brilliant.
Hmm.
So that she was actually, probably in the top 2 or 3 of the authors that I contacted first and said, what do you think about it? And she said, I'm in.
Okay, this may sound plebeian. I was going to ask you faith and brilliance. What is it about her that was brilliant? It's a question, but having grown up with her, my mom, right?
Yes, she must be obeyed.
Well, it's just whatever she did, well, it seemed normal to me, so I don't, when people say that about her, I certainly have an appreciation of the fact that Lee was very intelligent and that she had a lot of insight, but I'm trying to understand what that means in terms of the professionalism, in terms of the professional circles, in terms of, work that she was given or work that she took on. And of course, I suppose the measure of that, or a way to compare that, is to others. I mean, you deal with so many people,
Yes.
and I'm sure so many wonderful people. Out of all those wonderful people, well, what makes this person, what makes Lee somehow stand out? That's interesting to me, because I'm trying to understand her mind.
Right. Well,
Also,
when we first met, she didn't strike me as a terribly, she struck me as a very generous and kind woman, but not terribly warm in terms of putting herself out there. But I learned otherwise as the friendship grew, that Lee, when you met Lee, you were immediately accepted for who you were, but she needed to know more in order to have that trust and to build that friendship to love. And I really did love her. And I think that she was very demanding of others, but not nearly as demanding as she was of herself. I don't know how she was as a mother, the expectations she had for you and for your brother. But
she was wonderful, Mom. She was.
I'm sure she was.
She was encouraging.
Yep.
And warm. I mean, it was always, you can do it.
That's right.
Do it.
And respectful. Respectful of who you were.
Yeah, and not, she didn't see, like, I remember when I was in, I guess it's junior high or whatever, kind of grade school, and coming home and having to do this homework. And, I was in prep school, and a lot of it's really kind of daunting.
Yeah.
She would stand behind me while I was doing my homework, just as like moral support. She would just stand there, for like an hour or an hour and a half, however long it took me to get through it.
Yes.
And if I got to a part that, I was stumped on, I'd say, I don't understand this. And we would read through it together. and she would analyze it with me. She would break it down for me and make it possible for me to understand it.
Yes.
And so she didn't really, it wasn't like coddling, but it was, and I would say, oh, I'm so slow. I'm so slow. And she would say, no, you're thorough. So she would take something that you might see as a negative about yourself and turn it on its head, and see it for what she thought it was.
Well, you asked me a question of why do I say she was so incredibly intelligent, and it still comes down to that one word, curiosity. She was curious, and this is something that we enjoyed about each other. Who could rush to find the answer faster, in a sense. Your mother did not accept anything at face value. She needed to go under the surface and understand it. I mean, really understand it. As you said, she was thorough, and nothing, I learned through the friendship not to say something that was sort of lightweight and casual, because she was going to catch me on it and say, well, what do you mean by that? She'd make me think. Sometimes it was really annoying, but it was always fascinating, and I always loved it. It was one of the things I loved about her. It's interesting because someone asked me recently, what is primarily, if you were to fall in love again, what would have to be his first and foremost characteristic? And I said curiosity. If he's not curious, I'm not interested. I just want somebody who's excited about the world and is always wanting to learn. And your mother was like that. But she also had a composure about herself, as you know, that elegance, that sense of, she put out this sense of enormous confidence and of course self-respect, and she did, and she showed that respect to other people. And because she was like that, people began to be like that as well. They began to emulate her. She could be with somebody who had a lot of self-doubts, but because of the way she approached them, because of the way she communicated with them and encouraged them, you could just see that self-awareness and self-belief starting to come out, like saying to you, you're not stupid, you're thorough. There's a big difference. And that's who she was. And that was part of her spirituality as well. That ability to look at, the two sides. I don't want to say yin yang, but that's kind of, overdone. But to look at two sides of things and say, yes, you may think that you're that which is the negative, but look at how that translates into the positive as well. Look at the positive instead. It'll feel better. And it'll take you much farther along in your process of learning and feeling great about yourself. So that was her intellect for me. Plus the fact that innately she was so bright. So bright.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for asking.
Well, I'm not sure. I know that, okay, so one of the things that we mentioned, folks, is that Victoria is a playwright, so I'm not sure where to start with this, because how did you meet Lee? It was humorous, which of course led to Lee directing your first play.
Well, do you want to know how we met?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the story. I'm living in Paris. She's flying back and forth to Paris because she's a Francophile, as you know, and wanted to actually make her, move there and make her life there. And we were both stuck at the St. Louis airport. I was on my way to Paris and she was on her way back. And we had been flying TWA. And we were snowed in at St. Louis. And I didn't know her at all. And I didn't see her in the terminal. But finally, they announced that a shuttle would be at such and such a gate to pick us up. Such and such at the curb to pick us up, to take us to lodging for the night. So off we went with our bags, and I'm standing at the curb, and it's snowing lightly. And I remember it was very cold, and I'm standing next to this very elegant woman, tall, slim. Right away, those two words put me off completely, and lovely. And we started talking, and it was Lee Chamberlin. And as we began to talk about her work and my work, I realized when she said Electric Company that my children had been raised on Lee Chamberlin in Electric Company, and that and I had seen her in movies. I knew her very well from her film because I was a real fan of her because she was such a wonderful actress. And so we went to the it was either the Henry IV Motel or Henry VIII Motel. I'm not sure.
I think it was Henry VIII.
Whatever it was a downtrodden place. It was, I mean, it was doable. And I had a terrible food allergy at the time. So there was nothing left at the airport that I could eat because everybody had just cleaned it out. Everything left was like processed food, which would have put me into anaphylactic shock. And I was getting really, really hungry and cranky. And your mom, as we're standing waiting for the shuttle, said, I never travel without food. I have really healthy food. When we get to the hotel, I'll get it out of my bag and I'll share it with you, which she did. And that's how we became friends. It just kept going. I mean, I was in France. She was on her way to be in France. She was a writer. I was a writer. I think at the time I might have even been working on my first play, which I called The Deadly Competition. And she was very interested because it was how the French and the American scientists were hiding their research from each other to find some kind of a cure or treatment of HIV and AIDS. And so she said, well, let me see it when you've written it. And it's like, oh God, Lee Chamberlin, I can't show her my work. This is my very first play. And, I'm a hack. Okay, long story short, we had a friendship going. I don't think we even had email then because it was the early 90s. So it was probably around 91, maybe. Does that sound right? Yeah.
I think that it was about 93. And the reason I say that is because there was a heck of a blizzard that year because I had traveled from Paris, interestingly enough, also back to New York. And, I sort of had plans to, because the weather was good when I got home for winter. And I remember I had plans to go see Prince in Minnesota and Minneapolis.
Oh, wow.
And then this blizzard hit and it snowed without stopping.
Okay, so 93.
About 8 days, I think, literally. And it was just like you weren't going anywhere.
Right. Oh, no, we were stuck. There was no question we were stuck. So we became friends and I wrote this play and I sent it to her somehow. I'm not sure how, because I don't think, I'm sure it wasn't email.
The mail, regular post.
Yeah, it's probably, I probably faxed it to her, come to think of it. Anyway, she read it. And then sometime later, she was invited to direct a play at the Athena Playwrights Festival for Women. And her friend Lisa was involved in it, who was her dear, dear friend, and probably knew Lee as well or better than anybody on this planet. And they were not only friends, but they worked together. They were collaborators on things.
Where did this festival take place? Do you know? Or
yes, I mean it was all over Los Angeles.
Yeah,
I can't remember where my reading was, but I want to say it was somewhere in West Hollywood, or I'm not quite sure. It might have been in the Valley even. They had them in different venues. So your mother directed, and I learned a lot about myself and your mother in that experience. Yes, you can laugh, and I can laugh, but let me tell you something. She was a taskmaster and made it very clear to me from the beginning that I wrote the play, but she was the director. She would cast it, she would direct it. I could sit and watch with my mouth shut, but that was it. And boy, I'll tell you, it was a real lesson for me, which carried over many years later when Berkeley Rep picked up another play and then decimated it and decided not to do it after they had told me to send out announcements to everybody on my list about opening night. So it was a terrible experience. But working with your mom prepared me in many ways for what the theater was going to be like, and film as well. You put that out there and then you just step back and it doesn't belong to you anymore until they decide that it does. And you have to be thick-skinned and you have to have that confidence to say, okay, I did it. This is the best I can do. Now it's yours. And she was wonderful. And she was very kind and gentle, but very, very firm. So.
Did she have you do revisions?
I did revisions. Yeah, I mean, it was a really badly written play. It was my first play. I didn't know about showing and not telling. And I had the actors, blah, 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 rather than just one look cover, six pages of dialogue. All he had to do was turn and look at his partner and you knew what was going on. But I had seen so much theater, but I had never taken a course in playwriting.
Oh, okay.
But what happened was interesting was when I moved back to San Francisco, because of that play, and your mother saying you're not stupid, you're thorough, it was like she said to me, yes, it needs a lot of work, but it's all there. The heart of it is there. It's a wonderful story. I actually pitched some of my work to ACT up here in San Francisco, and I was invited into their Playwrights program. And they had a playwrights group at the time, and some of those playwrights were really, really top notch. And I learned a lot in there. I did a lot of listening and reading and watching how they edited. But your mother was really at the core of all of that. I'm not sure I would have ever gone into theater had it not been for her.
Very interesting.
And had she been alive when I did the Other Woman play, and been available to do it, I would have been thrilled to have her direct that, because it would have been something. She would have done a beautiful job.
Yeah, I think that was that was a couple of years ago now, right?
Well, I did the national
reading.
reading.
You asked me about that, and I did. Yeah, I did. Anyway, I did sort of let the folks know, and actually, I think my friend Jane Aquilina, I went to go see the reading of it.
Yes, Jane was one of the directors for that.
Street.
Yeah, when we did the 21 readings across the country on the same night. Right. I'm still in touch with Jane, and I have a play that I'd love her to take a look at, which she'll do when she has time. But she's moving and always changing. But I've never met her, but we have this lovely correspondence.
Jane's got a great big personality.
Yes,
she's a lot of person.
Yeah.
Great laugh and great sense of humor, and yes. a lot of emotion, a lot of feelings, and yeah. Kind of a firecracker in her own way.
Well, this new play has, the 3 actors, and they're 2 of them are in their 70s and one of them is in his 80s. It would be a very different kind of a play for her to do. But and I didn't even see her reading of The Other Woman that she did in New York, but I heard that it went very, very well. And there's just something about her. You sometimes just trust somebody without having met them. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so we've covered what it was like working with Lee as director. I wanted to, we've already pretty much come to the end. I mean, lastly, I guess, would you sum up or describe Lee as a professional artist and as a human being?
Oh my. You know what? I can't differentiate the two, because she conducted her art the way she conducted her life. It was always with great intellect, great dignity. She was always organized. She knew where she wanted to go, and she worked hard to get there. She was a woman of, from my perspective, of great ethics and dignity. She was one of those people I never had to question in my mind, am I doing the right thing by working with her on this, or is she going to do right by me? She didn't know how to do something that was not ethical and dignified, and used her intellect and her kindness. She and I spoke just a few days before she died, and it was one of the most important phone conversations I've ever experienced, because she said to me, it's been such a joy and a pleasure being friends with you. And to be able to say goodbye to somebody like Lee, and to be able to tell her, you added so much to my life. And I loved you. I've loved you through our friendship, and I will always love you and respect you and care about who you are. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful conversation. And her voice was so strong. I hung up thinking, she's going to go on forever. And then she passed away either the next day or the day after that. And I think your brother let me know. And it was a really monumental, momentous, beautiful moment in my life that I will never forget. I'm not even sure when she died now. Was it 2000?
Well, we're coming up to the anniversary. She died on May 25th, 2014 in Chapel Hill.
2014, yeah. I thought it was around 5
North
years.
Carolina, so we're coming up on the 5th anniversary.
Yeah. Well, I know how much I miss her, and she wasn't my mother, so I can only imagine the emptiness that you might feel that gets filled over and over again whenever you think of your your stories with your mom and how fortunate you were to have her for a mother.
Thank you. It's very beautiful. Everything you said was.
And she adored you. She adored
Yeah.
you. Talked about you all the time. All the time.
Yeah. Well, I don't feel. I mean, I don't feel an emptiness now.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, when someone first, dies and crosses over, it's just. Well, and I think especially when your mother dies.
Yes.
It's like God dies. It's like the whole universe just dies because,
Yes.
well, you started off in her and, she knows you. If you have a good mom, she knows you better than anyone else and kind of loves you warts and all. So that was very difficult. I would say the first year or so, I cried every single day. But, as time has gone on, I have to say that I feel her spirit with me very strongly.
Yes.
So that break, that was there, it's not there anymore. I think I've just become more sensitive and I've become more aware, to a spiritual dimension.
Yes.
And so it's good to have her around. It's very good to have her around. She is around.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Even if I wanted to shake her off, I wouldn't be able to. She's too tenacious. And our experiences together were too important in my life not to feel her presence. Absolutely. And it's funny. I don't know if you have this experience when you've either lost somebody you cared about or you haven't seen them for many years and you try to remember what their voice sounds like, or you try to picture them with your mother. Piece of cake. I can conjure her face in 2 seconds and her voice just as quickly. And that's very rare for me. Very rare. So anyway, listen, thank you for letting me share this with you. It's really meant a lot to me. And I hope that I've given you the information that you need.
It's been wonderful. I mean, you're just an eloquent speaker. So I guess in closing, I'll say, if there's any project or anything like that you've got coming up that you want the general public to know, again, just please shoot that over in an email and I'll make sure that I post it. This was lovely. Thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
To you too.